Hi, it's Linda Shiue. Welcome back to the Doctor's Spicebox. It's been a little while since my last video, but I'm back and I'm here to celebrate Mediterranean Diet Month. You may have heard me mention before in my last video that the Mediterranean diet is one of the diets or eating patterns for which we have the best scientific evidence for prevention of many chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer. So for this month, when I normally would be having a Thrive Kitchen class, teaching many foods from the Mediterranean diet and celebrating foods of the Mediterranean, instead I'll be presenting a couple of different recipes. For today's video, I'll be showing you how to make a pilaf, which can be made with rice or other grains, combined with spices, often aromatics like onions, sometimes dried fruit, and is basically a seasoned and savory grain dish. Today I'll be making a pilaf with barley, which is a whole grain with a low glycemic index, and that is enjoyed throughout the world, including in the Middle East. And we're going to use that barley to make a pilaf with chickpeas, which is a legume, which is an excellent source of protein and fiber, and make this a delicious and savory plant-based meal. So this dish requires a couple of different steps. First, I'll show you some of the ingredients, and while some of that is cooking, I'll go over their health properties. So we're actually going to start with some onions. I've sliced 2 medium onions here thinly, and we're going to start the process of browning those, not quite caramelizing, which is the process by which it would become very sweet, but somewhere in between just lightly sauteing and all the way to the caramelized stage. So for this first step here, as I mentioned, I'm going to have a pot in which I will warm together a couple tablespoons of butter. This is unsalted butter with some olive oil. And so I'm going to wait for those to melt. I'm doing this over a medium heat. And then after that, I'm going to add my sliced onions with a pinch of salt. And you want your pan to be fairly heavy or heavy bottomed so that it doesn't scorch. So the purpose of cooking the aromatics or the onions together first is to allow them to bring out a lot of their flavor, which is going to season our grains. The grains, in this case barley, will be cooked directly in the same pot with the onions. I'm going to add just a pinch of kosher salt to this, and this will bring out some of the browning and the flavor. You notice I used just a pinch. Using salt at the right times in the cooking process will add flavor and assist with cooking without adding too much sodium. A pinch when measured is about 1/16 of a teaspoon, very little. So I'm going to let this continue to cook on its own. This is going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to get softened and brown, and we'll check on it periodically, but we don't need to attend to it constantly. While that's cooking, let me show you some of our other ingredients. Barley is a whole grain, and you can see it up close here, about the size of rice. And like all whole grains, it contains all 3 parts of the grain. So barley has a low glycemic index, and because it can take a little longer to cook, what I've done is I've actually pre-soaked it. This is a cup of that same barley that I've soaked in cold water for about an hour to soften it, and it'll speed up the cooking process and also make it a little bit fluffier when it's all cooked. It's going to take a second to check on my onions, and you'll see at this point, I'll just show you, that the onions are starting to get translucent, but they're not browned yet, so we need a little bit more time for that. And I'm just going to put the cover on so they can also steam a little bit together. The other ingredients that we have here include the chickpeas that I talked about. So these are canned low sodium chickpeas, which I have then rinsed to further reduce the sodium. We also have some pine nuts, which add some really nice flavor and crunch, and also a little bit of healthy fats to this dish. Another thing I'll do actually while we're waiting for our onions to continue to brown is to toast the pine nuts. Toasting nuts or seeds can be done in a small frying pan over low to medium heat very quickly. I like to do that on the stove as opposed to in the oven when I have a small amount, just because they can burn very quickly, which ruins the whole batch. So here I have a small frying pan, and in this I'm going to add our untoasted pine nuts. They're fine the way they are, but they taste a little raw, and toasting will really bring out a nice color, kind of a golden toasty color, and more importantly flavor, as well as crunch. So I have heated this pan over low to low medium heat, and I'm just gonna let the pine nuts sit there without adding any additional fat or oil. They don't need it. So I've been toasting these pine nuts now for about 2 minutes, and you'll see that they're nicely golden brown. Some of them are still pale. You're not going to get them evenly toasted, but you don't want to get them too dark because they'll taste scorched. So this is about how we want them. I've taken them off the heat, and I'm going to let them just stay in the pan and cool off the heat until we're ready to use them, which will be at the end so that we maintain their texture. So what I'm doing here is really thinking about the different steps of this cooking process so that we're efficient, because you don't want to be waiting for one part to finish, which is the cooking of the onions, and then spend more time doing the next step and waiting for that to happen. So while the onions have been cooking, I was able to toast our pine nuts, and now the onions are probably pretty ready. So let's check on those. Great. So I think our onions are pretty ready. Now, you may wonder, since we're going to be cooking our grains in here with some cooking liquid, why we didn't just throw it all in together without taking this step of browning the onions. And the answer, of course, is flavor. So you'll see here that our onions are nice and soft now, and they're kind of golden brown, and the fragrance is pretty incredible. If we didn't take this step, we would really lose a lot of the flavor. It would just be boiled onions, which definitely is okay, but is not all the flavor that we want. So now that these are headed towards halfway towards the caramelized stage, I'm going to add our pre-soaked barley directly to the pot, and I'm just mixing that together here with our onions in the same pot. Going to add, again, a little bit of salt, a few pinches here. In this next stage, which is the cooking stage, and a few grinds of freshly ground black pepper. You're going to adjust this later at the end. You don't want to make it too salty or too anything at this point. Again, I'm cooking and slightly toasting the grains over the same medium heat with our cooked onions here. And then I'm adding our cooking liquid, which is some unsalted vegetable broth here. Whenever possible, and you're cooking grains and you want to add more flavor, use a flavored cooking liquid. The goal with any grain, whatever you're cooking, is that you want it to cook just until all the water is absorbed, or the liquid is absorbed into your grain. And so that's what we're going to do here. Besides the cooking liquid and the salt and pepper, we're going to add another very important flavor element for this dish, which are the spices. So spices are used widely in all cuisines, and in particular in Middle Eastern cooking, I think one of the flavor signatures is some sweet spice. So we're using two things in this, about a half teaspoon of each, some ground allspice and also some ground cinnamon. Cinnamon adds sweetness without having to add any sugar, and it also can reduce blood sugar as well as blood pressure. Allspice, which is the ground form of a spice made out of a berry, has a really complex and very nice and savory, sweet flavor profile, which to a lot of people tastes like a combination of cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, and black pepper. A little bit of a bite there. So I'm going to add those while our grains are cooking, and this will allow the flavor to really permeate the barley as it cooks. So it'll be just steamed right into that. So I'm just stirring that straight in and covering it until we steam it all the way. To make good use of our time while the barley is cooking with the browned onions and the spices in the vegetable broth, we're going to make the finishing touch, which is just a seasoned yogurt that's added on just for a little bit of creaminess to balance the other flavors to the finished dish. So we here have just some Greek yogurt, and into it I'm going to grate a garlic clove. You could also mince this very finely or make a garlic paste and stir it in, but I find that using this rasp style grater is a great way to get tiny bits of garlic goodness without too much of a bite. So we're just going to grate it. And this is going to go directly into our bowl of yogurt. Okay, and then since a lot of it has stuck to the side, I'm just going to tap it. And then I'm going to squeeze into it the juice of half of a lemon. And then the final ingredient that we're going to put into our yogurt is just going to be some salt and or pepper to taste. If you don't want to use pinches, I would start with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and then adjust as needed to taste. You may want to also adjust the amount of lemon juice if your lemons aren't very tart or if your lemon isn't very big. Right, so now we have our yogurt sauce prepared and we haven't wasted any time while we're waiting for the pilaf to be cooking. So we'll set that aside. The other ingredients which I'll show you, since we'll be adding those very soon, are the chickpeas, which I mentioned is our plant-based source of protein. And this makes it really a complete meal that you can serve with a side salad or other assorted vegetables. We're also going to add a lot of these beautiful herbs here. So we have some fresh mint. We have some parsley. I like to use Italian or flat parsley. And then some cilantro. 1/4 cup or handful of each of these, roughly chopped, are going to get mixed directly into the pilaf once it's done cooking, and that will be added along with the chickpeas and with the toasted pine nuts that we have cooling right now to make a really beautiful, fragrant, and delicious meal. Herbs also are a great source of fiber, lots of antioxidants and other nutrients, and they do count in your servings of fruits and vegetables, or I should say vegetables. So don't just use herbs as a garnish. They add so much more than that, and it's really nice to keep them fresh. What I do is I treat herbs like a bouquet of cut flowers. Basically, my upcycled reused glass jars filled with a little bit of water, just enough to touch the stems but not the leaves. So shall we check on our barley now? It's been cooking for about 20 minutes while we made the yogurt sauce and while I've talked about some of the other ingredients with you. Let's take a look. Oh, great, perfect timing. And you can see from that steam that all the water has been absorbed into the barley and it's incredibly fragrant right now. So this is the time where you're going to add the chickpeas and just stir those in, and they're going to be seasoned by what's already in the pan, which again is salt, pepper, as well as the cinnamon and allspice. Kind of just stir it all in. And then this is a good time to adjust your salt and pepper to taste as well. So I am going to taste it first. The barley is perfectly cooked. It's soft, but also has a very nice chew, which I find very satisfying. Needs a little bit more salt. I've added about 1/8 of a teaspoon there. So I'm stirring that all in. And you can see there's still a lot of steam there. That steam is going to continue to permeate it and fluff it up, and I'm going to cover it to take advantage of that and let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes until it's been able to steam all of the barley together. The salt that I've just added will also basically be driven into the cooked grains as the steam continues the last bit of the cooking process, which at this point is off heat. Okay, that's been about another 5 or 10 minutes, and I was allowing the barley to continue to steam, that last bit of steam to fluff it all up. Let's see what we have here. Great, it looks perfect. This is our barley and chickpea pilaf with caramelized onions and allspice and cinnamon. And we're gonna add those last bits that we've saved till the end for color and texture. So we have some coarsely chopped 1/4 cup each of, here is our Italian parsley, our mint, and our cilantro, and that's all going to go in. In addition, I'm gonna stir in those beautifully toasted pine nuts that we've saved till the end so they don't get softened. And that's gonna just get all stirred in together into our pilaf. Again, the herbs add a lot of flavor and nutrition, as well as break up the monotony of what otherwise would be kind of a all brown dish. So that's our finished pilaf there. I'm gonna plate a serving of it. So here's the serving. It's about a cup or so. And this is that yogurt sauce that we made earlier. And I've basically just put a dollop of that yogurt here. So that's that lemony and garlicky yogurt that will just kind of cool down the pilaf and add a little bit of creaminess to it. And it's a really great complementary flavor to the sweet spices, the cinnamon and allspice in it. So this is our very simple, about half an hour start to finish, maybe a little bit more, a dish of barley that's been cooked in vegetable broth with allspice and cinnamon, nearly caramelized onions, really browned and softened onions, as well as toasted pine nuts, bunch of herbs, mint, parsley, and cilantro, and then cooled off with lemony garlicky yogurt. So what do we have here in terms of nutrition? We have whole grains, which offer you fiber, B vitamins, iron, and protein, as well as a low glycemic index, which means that it is really good for your blood sugar control. You also have onions, which add not just beautiful flavor, but also prebiotics, which means that they contribute to the formation of probiotics, which are basically bacteria for a healthy gut. Important both for digestion as well as for really prevention of all chronic diseases, we're learning. And then we have some healthy fats, monounsaturated fats in the pine nuts, which also add flavor and crunch. We have the protein and fiber from our chickpeas, and then we have also some protein in our yogurt, which also adds some more probiotics and is also a good calcium source. And then to go back to those spices, we have the benefits of both flavor and health benefits of those. Cinnamon, again, for blood sugar and blood pressure control, and allspice, which has lots of antioxidants, but also can help with digestion, including preventing bloating and gas formation that can happen when people eat beans. So really all of it makes sense together, but even if you ignore all of that, it's just a delicious dish that makes a very healthy lunch or light dinner, and you can serve that with any salads of your choice. Enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Doctor's Spicebox, and I hope you'll try this. And if you want to substitute other spices, other whole grains, try them out. Just use what you have and what you like and what you're used to, or be adventurous and try another grain. And if you have any interesting substitutions, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you've done with this. Take care.